But my latest piece is the Lord's Prayer in the eye of a needle. And this is the one I want to be remembered by.
We have a very special guest today, Graham Short, all the way from England. Graham is a micro artist engraver. He has tremendous work, world famous. He has had exhibits at different galleries. The first one I believe he did sold out in 20 minutes, and the second one was just in a few minutes. So welcome to the show, Graham.
Thank you, Ken. You make me sound better than I am. I don't think I'm that talented. I think it's more of a medical affliction. I know I'm not normal.
Well, from looking at the work that you do, I think you're a humble man.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit, Graham, about your upbringing.
My upbringing, my childhood was quite, I was bullied at school. My mother was very good. She made clothes for me. She ran them up on a sewing machine. I was bullied, but not by other children, by one of the teachers. And he would walk up behind me as I sat at my desk, and he'd whisper so that nobody else could hear him. And he said, who's wearing handmade clothes? I was really upset. I never ever told my mother that. It would have killed her. She wouldn't have coped with that. So that's how it was when I was at school. I left school at 15, no qualifications whatsoever, totally unprepared for working life. And I went to work at a local print works in the city. My first day there, the boss said, your job for the first 6 months is to empty the mouse traps and make the tea for the men in the factory. It was a 6-year apprenticeship. And he said, while you're doing that, I'll teach you how to do copper plate hand engraving, which was wedding invitations. And I absolutely hated the picking up the traps. In the mornings, that's to crawl under the benches and get the traps and drop the dead mice into a dustbin. It was the boss's ritual. He liked it. He came in at 9 o'clock and all the men had stopped work and watch him. And he'd lift the lid to the dustbin and count out loud how many mice were, usually about 9 or 10. Well, at the end of the first week, I went back. I said to my mother, that's it. Don't want to be an engraver anymore. She said, why ever not? I thought you're enjoying it. And I told her what I did. In fact, I said to her, I don't think I'm cut out to work with animals. And she said, who sets the traps in the evening? I said, that's my job as well. She said, why don't you put the food on the spike, but don't pull the spring back? Then in the night, the mice will come, take the food, and off they'll go. Now, my mother lived to be 100 years and 1 month. And I can tell you now, that's the best advice she ever gave me. So, of course, the next day, the boss came in, lifted the lid to the dustbin. No mice at all. He didn't say anything. So, obviously, I thought I've got away with that. Did the same the next day. Everybody stopped work. They're all watching him. He lifted the lid to count the mice. No mice again. He slammed it down and said, come on, in my office. I want a word with you. I know what you've done. I'd finished my first week. I was going to be sacked. Everybody was frightened of him. A big man he was. I followed him into the office, sat down behind his desk. He said, I know what you've done. You've done something no other apprentice before you has done. You have managed to eradicate the mice from these premises. And of course, I didn't own up to that. Just one of the many things in life that I've never owned up to. And when I finished my apprenticeship at the age of 21, because my main work was letterheads, business cards, and wedding invitations. And what I did, I went to London, and I went to Savile Row, where the costume, the shirt makers were there. And according to the company, the biggest one, number one Savile Row, was Greaves and Hawkes, shirt makers to the royal family. And I went in and I asked to speak to the stationery buyer. Now, today you couldn't do it. You'd have to make an appointment. But the lady behind the desk said, I'll go and get him for you. So they brought him down. And I traveled over 100 miles there. I'd driven there. And I spoke to him. I showed him samples of my work in bus stationery. And he absolutely loved it. And I said, I'd like to do Greaves and Hawkes stationery. But I said, I'll tell you what I will do. I'll give you 2 reams. That's a couple of thousand sheets for nothing. And he said, why would you do that? I said, well, once I've done yours, I will go around all the other shops in Jermyn Street and Savile Row, and I'd show them samples, and I'd tell them I'm supplying you. And that's exactly what I did. I took the 2 boxes of stationery to him when I finished. All it costed me was the printing. I had to pay for that. But the engraving of the steel dies, that was free, 'cause it's just my time. And then I went around all the other shops and I picked up 7 orders just because I took a chance to do it. I was a lapsed Methodist. My parents were staunch Methodists, and Sunday was the day of the Lord, and it was the Sabbath. We didn't do anything other than go to church in the morning and evening as well. There no playing, nothing. We had to do everything right, and that's how my father was, and I accept that. But what I did then, after going around Savile Row and all the shirt makers and the costume makers, I then contacted. I did work for Buckingham Palace, and in fact, first of all, I did Harrods Stationery and Fortnum and Mason, the big stores in London. Then I picked up the. I was engraving letterheads for all the London finance houses, Barings, Goldman Sachs, Warburgs, Morgan Stanley. I got such an envious client list. I couldn't believe it. And then I started doing work for Buckingham Palace. And I used to go to the Palace probably every 4 months at the time. And I've met every Queen's private secretary over the years. Nowadays, I go every 18 months. It's less often. Buckingham Palace, enormous place, 800 rooms there, and we meet right in the middle. And I'm in a room with the Queen's private secretary. I've seen them all over the years, and we discuss the stationery requirements. They usually repeat orders, never any new stuff. Sometimes you get the occasional wedding invitation, and very rarely a death notice I'm engraving. But I've engraved for Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Balmoral, and Sandringham. Now, the most amazing day for me, and I was always working on my own in Birmingham's Jewellery Quarter, was the 5th of April, 1985. I was sitting here, it was Good Friday, and I was in work. I was working, I hate to say it, I was working so many hours every day of the week, getting in early, finishing at 10 at night. And I hadn't got time for religion, to be honest. And it was Good Friday, a sunny day, 7 o'clock. And I was looking out over the city. It was quiet, absolutely nobody about. And because I was on my own, I spoke out loud and I asked God to give me a sign. Just show me that you exist. And I saw nothing. And I sat there for a while. Now, there were, at that time in Birmingham, there were buildings being built and flats and stores and everything all the time. In fact, the joke was that Birmingham's national bird is the crane, and there were cranes all over the city centre. There were 3 I was looking at in the distance. The middle crane started to turn and it stopped in the shape of a cross. I'd asked God to give me a sign, and I wasn't elated, I wasn't happy, I wasn't pleased. I was quite frightened, actually, that this had happened. I didn't tell anybody. It was probably 3 weeks later, and I saw a friend of mine who works in the construction industry, and he told me, he said it's called weather vaning. Now, I didn't know, but a crane has a brake, and if they're expecting violent winds in the night, they release the brake so that it turns, so it won't topple over. But it was a quiet day. It wasn't windy. Everything was still. And that one instance restored my faith. It really did. And I haven't told many people about that, but I was quite shocked, actually, when it happened. I can't say I was pleased. Over the years, I've studied the engravers from the 1700s. I like how they work, and I could even tell, looking at their work, whether an engraver was right-handed or left-handed. I saw that they had what they used to do, they get the apprentices trying to engrave the Lord's Prayer as small as possible. And that gave me the idea then. I thought, I wonder if I could engrave the Lord's Prayer, but on the head of a pin. And I was working on that for years and years. What I was doing, I was actually working on my main stationery work, letterheads, business cards, wedding invitation. But when the work went quiet, I'd pick a pin up and try engraving the Lord's Prayer on that. And I wasted years purely because I had no idea what I was doing. what I do now, I keep an oversized sketch in front of me. And I look at it all the time. I work under a microscope. In fact, I'll explain how I work. I work from midnight to 5 a.m. I do that to avoid any vibration from passing traffic. If a lorry went past outside, it would feel like an earthquake through my microscope. I also, nothing high tech about it, I also wear a stethoscope, which I tape to my chest. I've got a friend in Birmingham who owns 3 chemist shops, and he gives me potassium, magnesium, and beta blockers. I confess I eat them like sweets, but in the night, I'm listening to my heart rate and it drops to about 20 beats a minute. And that's when I try to work. I use very fine needles. Again, nothing high tech, just a needle pushed into a wooden engraving handle. And that's what I work with. Every 3 months, I have a course of Botox injections. I have to be as still as possible and have these injections so that there's no distraction from my nerves and muscles while I'm working. I do go to extremes. I also swim a lot. I've always been a swimmer all my life. I do between 5,000 and 8,000 meters every day, even at my age of 76. And I'm really quite fit for my age. And that gives me, because the fitter you are, the lower your resting heart rate. So it gives me a good base to work from before the tablets start working. And what I try and do then is, I say, just work, engrave between heartbeats, but the smallest lettering I can engrave by hand is 6 microns high. Now, to give you an example, a hair is 100 microns thick. It's the same size as a red human blood cell, but in the night, I can manage, because I have to wait and wait and wait till the moment feels right. I can do probably 7 or 8 cuts on the smallest lettering. That would give me a letter E and a letter F completed. It's really, so if I go up slightly in size, I know that I can do it a bit quicker. But I was working on steel dress pins. There's 278 letters in the Lord's Prayer. But say without a sketch, I hadn't got a clue. I'd start on one side of the pin, get to the other, find I was halfway through a word, that was no good. I'd get to the bottom and then realize I've got another 5 or 6 lines of lettering to go on. I was absolutely hopeless. I kept throwing the pins away. Nowadays, the jewelers who work in the jewelry quarter make me gold pins. They're all the same size, 2 millimeters across, but they're soft and easy to work in, easy to cut into. And I say without the sketch, I couldn't do it. Now I'm looking at my sketch, say with the Lord's Prayer, the 4th line down is the letter M directly under a D in the line above it. And that's the only way I can do it. I hate to say it, but it's easy when I've got the sketch in front. Now I've told you it's easy, you'll be doing it yourself. You'll be trying this tonight, but it is actually, once I've got a sketch in front of me.
So you started on the Lord's Prayer. And how long did it take you to complete that?
I was on that, well, because I didn't work on it continuously, because I was doing my engraving, my stationary work. I could pick a pin up and try and put it down and pick it up again and throw it away and repolish. With the gold pins, I repolished them. And I was on that for about 20 years, not continuously, nowhere near that, just on and off. I was trying. It's only when I started working on the gold pins that it became a lot easier. The steel pins were too hard, too brittle, kept slipping, no good at all. I suffered with them, and I shouldn't really have wasted so much time on it. But my latest piece is the Lord's Prayer in the eye of a needle. And this is the one I want to be remembered by. I've done quite a few bits and pieces over the years, but this one is so small. Again, it's nothing high tech about that. I put a speck of gold in the eye, hit it with a hammer, and it's solid. And that's what I engrave on. I polish it to work on it. But again, I always slip. I was on the Lord's Prayer in the eye of a needle for 11 months on and off. And what I'm doing with it, I don't really want to sell it. What I want to do is take it around the schools. If I can inspire youngsters, primary school children, that's what I want to do. Now, the children of age 15 and 16, they're not interested. I've been around. They know it all at that age. Can't teach them anything. But the youngsters absolutely love it. And I've got 12 schools already booked up that I'm going to travel around Britain. Because I give talks around the country. So I really enjoy meeting the children. And what we're going to do, we've already decided with a few of the schools, I'm going to give them a coin, which is about 1 inch diameter. And they'll have a piece of paper, a sharp pencil, and they've got to try and write the Lord's Prayer within that. But when I go in and tell them that the gold in the eye of my needle is 50 times smaller. They'll be absolutely amazed. So I go along with my PowerPoint presentation. It's more about trying to inspire them, and I can show them how really I started from nothing, and that their future is secure. They just need to concentrate, work hard, and get on with it. But that's what I want to do.
Talk about a minute about some of the different pieces, like you did the firing pin of a bullet.
Yeah, that was it was on the firing pin, on where the firing pin hits the bullet, the indentation. I engraved the Second Amendment, America's right to bear arms. That was sold to an I sell to art investors, and they hang on to my work for 2 or 3 years and try and sell it for more money. That's the plan. I sold that for 30,000. The guy who bought it a few years ago contacted me recently, and it's going into auction actually in New York with a price of 100,000 on it. So people buy them hoping they'll go up in price, and that they often go up quite a lot actually.
How long did it take to do the bullet?
They usually take about 3 months each piece. Yeah, it all depends how much is on it. But on every job, I always slip and have to restart again. It's not as though I can put the needle in and push it. There's nowhere to move, and I always slip on my work. So it's frustrating at times.
Mm-hmm. When you're doing exhibits and you're watching the people look at your work, what is their reactions when they see this that the naked eye can't even see?
That's the best thing about my job, Ken. It's watching people, because when it's in the gallery, it's under the microscope, and they're looking down, and then they look to see what it's on, and they can't believe it. It's one lady, actually, the Lord's Prayer was in a gallery on the head of a pin, not the latest one in the needle. And the lady was looking at it, and she got down on her knees, looking up at the lens. She thought the lettering was on the lens of the microscope. But I get a fantastic reaction, and that's the best part. People really appreciate it. I try to shock people in many ways. I want them to think that's impossible. And if they think that and then enjoy looking at it, it's a good feeling. I absolutely love. That's the best part of my job, seeing the reaction from people.
In 2022, you did a nativity scene.
Yes, my local church. They had a nativity festival. I think there would have been about 60 models that people had made, and some came from. I think some came from Greece and South America. It looked really good. And so I had an idea. I thought, I wonder if I could engrave the nativity scene again in the eye of a needle on a speck of gold. So I did that and took it along. We had a wonderful reaction. The local BBC came round, and it was in the news in 13 countries around the world. It always surprises me when it takes off, and I do get the publicity. It really surprises me when other countries pick up on it.
So when you're making your cuts at night and you have the stethoscope hooked up to your chest, the purpose of that is to make a stroke or a touch in between your heartbeats.
Yeah, I have to be absolutely still, no movement at all. Sometimes I can feel the pulse in my finger and in my fingertips, and that affects it. I really have to be as still as possible.
Your arm is not moving. You have it.
No, I loop a leather strap around my elbow. The other end goes around a heavy press, and I pull against it as hard as I can, and that keeps my hands steady. I'm absolutely not moving at all while I'm working.
Are you still doing? I guess I don't know if you would call it mundane work, like stationery or.
No, that's not. Nowadays, people don't want hand engraved stationery, which is a shame. The embossed stationery, when it was done, was beautiful, but over the years I lost so many customers, and the people I do it for now is Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Balmoral, and Sandringham. And yet I've done 10 Downing Street, House of Commons, done them all over the years. Chanel was another one.
As far as your work goes, I know you do everything by hand. Is the technology out there now where there's micro engravers that are doing this with computers?
No, I'm the only one doing the microscopic engraving. There are 3 or 4 micro artists who carve models inside the eyes of needles.
Nothing done by computer or high tech or
Oh
anything.
God, no, 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 not at all.
It's got to be swimming for a couple of hours a day, and then working from 12 to 5 at night. It's got to be you have to be very passionate to continue to do this type of work, because that's kind of a lot of people couldn't handle being alone that much.
Oh, I've got used to it over the. I've always worked on my own since I was 21. I've been on my own, so no problem at all. I like it. I like the solitude of it. And I don't work every night, Ken. I can only manage 3 nights in a row now. I get so tired. I have to have normal days. Now, on the normal days, that's when I can do my sketches. That I don't need to do that at night. That's when I'm checking the internet, looking for nice quotes. I like quotes of children and families that I'm trying to find. And of course, I do lots of talks around the UK. I'm traveling a lot now, but I'm 76 and I do get tired. I couldn't do it every night.
Do you have a project in the future that you're looking to tackle?
Well, every year I do a lot I try and do a piece for charity. The Institute of Cancer Research contacted me a couple of years ago. They said the poet laureate, Simon Armitage, they asked if I'd work with him. So Simon wrote a poem on cancer and I engraved it on 2 cancer tablets. And it was probably the most difficult job I've ever done. In fact, the second difficult, I've done 2 that should absolute a nightmare. The tablets kept crumbling as I'm trying to engrave. If I'm cutting into gold, silver, platinum, or whatever, you get a clean cut. But the tablets were hopeless. The cancer research people kept sending me more and more tablets every few days. And in the end, I did it. It was passable, but it wasn't perfect. But another job I did was the engraving of a badger's paw print on a wheel inside a watch. This is a real top quality Brax LaRue watch. And the wheel had been hardened. Obviously, it can't wear, the cogs can't. So I struggled and struggled. I ended up sending my needles away to be hardened. And that was no good. So what I did then, I got a small diamond and I bashed it with a hammer and I picked a small shard of diamond and super glued it to the end of my needle. And I used that to cut into the wheel. But it was so difficult, it was. I try and avoid these difficult things. But a few years ago, Stephen Fry, the broadcaster and writer, contacted me. He said, I've got a fountain pen. Would you engrave a quote on it for me? He said, I want to put it into Sotheby's in auction. Any money raised, we're going to give to English Pen. Now, English Pen is a charity that represents imprisoned writers around the world. So I said to him, yeah, I'll do that. So anyway, he sent me his pen. Knowing that he's an Oscar Wilde fan, I engraved an Oscar Wilde quote, I can resist everything except temptation, on the tip of the nib. And it took me 3 months. I couldn't hold the nib steady enough while I was trying to engrave, kept slipping, repolishing and starting again because the nib has a split end to allow the ink to flow. When I finished it, he contacted me. He said, I've now got the quote. I want you to put on my pen. Well, of course, it wasn't that. And he wanted, he sent me the quote. It's waggled in the right way. This inky little stick can change the world. So I engraved that on the pen, but I don't know how much it sold for in Sotheby's, but whoever bought it doesn't know he's got an Oscar Wilde quote on the tip of the nib.
Yeah, that's one of the things I admire about you is all of the different charity work you do. That's I think when you reach a certain point in life, it's good to give back.
I think you should, Ken. What I've done is for the Cyber Smart Foundation. They're based in California. They look after children who have been bullied online. That's a good charity, that is. So I've sent them a piece. Whether they'll auction it, then that's my hope. But they might auction it and raise money for the charity. I was in Los Angeles at the had an exhibition there. Next to the gallery was a hotel, and they were holding a NASA convention, which they have every year. And Neil Armstrong was there, the first man to walk on the moon. And I saw him there and had an idea. And I thought, I wonder. I mean, I have these Birmingham ideas, and they always let me down. And I thought, I wonder if I could ask him if he's got a spare piece of moon rock that he doesn't want, that I could engrave his quote on. And that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, which is said when he stepped on the moon. So when he came round, I said, you haven't got a spare piece of moon rock, have you? He said, oh, he said, everybody asked me that. Of course I haven't. Then off he went. And they were playing he stood on the stage, they were playing a stirring song. You're going to know which one it is. Last few words of the song are, there ain't no doubt I love this land, God bless the USA. And he was standing upright, hand on his heart, patriotic man, as you'd expect, really loud voice. And when he came round, I remembered I got my passport with me. So I said, look at this, because my date of birth is July the 4th, American Independence Day. He hugged me, said, you're an honorary American. If you're here tomorrow morning, I'll have something for you. But he didn't give me a piece of moon rock. He gave me a commemorative medal. I don't kid myself. It's not the one the president gave him. I think he had a box of these that he gave people just to get rid of them. Anyway, I engraved his quote along the edge. And knowing I was going again next year, I thought I'll take him a gift. And I got the jewelers in the jewelry court to make me a gold pin, which was really heavy. And I got a nice brass magnifying glass. And 2 weeks before I flew out, saw in the news that he died. And he would have loved that. I was so disappointed. One man was interesting. You'll know about him. He sent me an email 10 years ago. He said, if I had your ability when I was younger, I would never have got caught. Didn't know what he was. Emailed him back straight away. And he was working with legitimately with a fraud squad in New York. And he told me his name's Frank Abagnale. And then he told me about his life. He said between the age of 16 and 21, I posed as a pilot with Pan Am. He said I was flying around the world. He said Leonardo DiCaprio has played him in a film called Catch Me If You Can. Couldn't believe it. And he said if he had my ability when he was younger, he'd never have got caught. But 6 years ago, I've kept in touch with him over the years by email. 6 years ago, the new £5 notes came out in Britain. And I thought I'll try and engrave a portrait of Jane Austen on the notes and then drive around Britain, spending them, one in England, one in Scotland, one in Wales, one in Northern Ireland. I wanted somebody to get one in the change in the shop and sell it and make some money for Christmas. That was the plan. And I told Frank Abagnale what I was going to do. He said, don't touch it. It's a 1928 Bank Act. You'll be prosecuted for defacing the notes. So I told my manager at the time, he said, call the Bank of England, be upfront with them, tell them what you intend doing, and listen, tell me what they say. So I called them and I told him what I was going to do. He said, I don't know if you've seen in the news, but the BBC are having a go at us because we're putting animal products in the making of the notes. He said, if you go ahead and get some publicity, you'll take the heat off us. I said, don't encourage me to do it and then prosecute me. Oh, no, we won't do that. I said, is there a fine? He said, there is. Maximum fine, £200. So I thought it was worth it. Anyway, I did that. Went around Britain spending them, and it was good fun. And that was in the news in 58 countries around the world. 3 turned up. The one I spent in England didn't. It's still out there somewhere.
Any other projects you're looking at?
Well, yeah, because I'm known now for engraving on the £5 notes. People are asking me to engrave on currency on notes for them. I've engraved Marilyn Monroe on a £5 note using 2,300 dots of varying sizes. It's come out really well. I've also engraved Rosa Parks on a note. I've sent that to the Rosa Parks Museum in Troy University in Alabama, so they've got that. I do give quite a lot away. I did Che Guevara, the revolutionary, on another note, and that's gone to Argentina, to the Che Guevara Museum. So I'm doing quite a lot on notes at the moment.
Have you ever been approached by younger men wanting to be your apprentice?
Oh, yeah. Not so much wanting that. In the jewelry quarter, I work next to the School of Jewelry, and there are 2 young men, I think they're about 19 or so. They come in and watch me work, and they bring me samples of their work. They bring copper plates in. They're training to be gun engravers. And these 2 lads are so clever. I couldn't do what they do. What they do, they use an ordinary engraving tool, but they angle it as they're cutting, and the light catches it. And you get, say, a swan or a grouse that has a 3D effect when the light's on it. Absolutely stunning. And I saw one of them in the street recently, and I said, how's it going? So he said, I've given it up. I've started a new course, media studies. I've got an ambition. I want to work in the background on the X Factor program. And I thought, oh no, a talented young lad like that, not interested. I'd given them some of my needles that I've engraved with and bits of copper for them to try, but they're not bothered. I think because it's taken me 62 years to get right, I think they can't face facing that, spending that much time on it. When I first went to Buckingham Palace, the Queen's private secretary said, "Could I meet him in this?" It's a room which is quite big, actually, which is next to the main kitchen, right in the centre of Buckingham Palace. And you see an army of tradesmen wandering about. There's painters, electricians, plumbers, decorators. They come to this room because it's next to the kitchen, and the chefs make soup, sandwiches, and baguettes and lays out around the room. A workman will come in, pick up a sandwich, and take it back to wherever he's working in the palace. So it's a busy room. People are coming and going. And the private secretary at the time said, if a royal comes in, you must stand up and introduce yourself. They said they will have checked his diary. They know where he is in the palace. They even know who he's speaking to. I didn't see anybody. It was probably a couple of years later. And he looked round while I was speaking to him. He said, a royal. And it was Princess Anne came to have a word. And of course, I remember stand up and introduce yourself. I was so nervous. I said, good afternoon, Your Majesty. And she said to him, do I look as old as my mother these days? I said, I do apologise, Your Royal Highness. She said, why don't you call me Anne? And I met her 4 times since over the years, called her an absolutely lovely, lovely lady, down to earth, wonderful woman.
What church do you go to in England?
It's a local church, Church of England. Yeah, I'm going there next week, actually. They've asked me to give a talk on a Saturday afternoon to raise some funds for the church restoration. It's one of the oldest churches in Birmingham, medieval church, and it needs some work doing on it. So we'll see if we can get a few people in, and I'll do my PowerPoint presentation for them. Tell them lots of funny stories of the rich and famous people I've worked with, and they'll enjoy that.
Well, Graham, it's been a pleasure visiting with you, man. I really thank you so much for your time and your talent.
No, thank you, Ken. I really appreciate this.